So one of the things we've been discussing on this show are things that we can accomplish on the local level. And tonight's guests are coming on to do just that. We've talked about reparations on the show multiple times, and we have seen, obviously, this is not happening on the national level. And some people are trying to make things happen through the state. So let's go ahead and bring them in here. Welcome. Hello.
Peace.
Good evening. How are you?
Good evening. How you doing?
Doing great. All I do is just ask everybody to mute unless you're speaking so we don't get a background noise. And we're going to go ahead and let everyone introduce themselves, and then we'll go ahead and jump right in. Let's start with BTP. Mr. Ali.
Hey, Sabby, how's everything? Okay,
Hey,
so I'm Ali from United Sons and Daughters of Freedmen, as well as Be the Power, a co-founder and board member, as well as the Director of History and Research.
Awesome. Okay, Naeem.
Hey, how you doing, Sister Sabby Sabs? First, let me just say, follow you on Twitter /X. I always share your content. I'm definitely a fan of your work. My name is Naeem Wade. I am president and co-founder of United Sons and Daughters of Freedmen, also one of the co-founders of Be the Power, political education and advocacy group. And, we're here to have a discussion about the bill in Massachusetts and proper language, and why, especially in today's politically charged times, having the proper legislation will ensure that we can get these programs up and running.
All right, sounds good. And Antonia.
Hi, good evening. My name is Antonia Edwards. I am the co-founder of Solidarity and Community Engagement Group here in Boston, also the Community Engagement Director for United Sons and Daughters, and I'm really happy to be on your show. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you to all of you for coming on. So the first thing I want to dive into is United Sons and Daughters. I want to go ahead and bring this up on the screen here. This is United Sons, Daughters of Freedmen. I want to talk a little bit about this. And first and foremost, because we've heard different terms about this in reference to lineage. Some people refer to ourselves as American descendants of slavery. Some people say refer to ourselves as freedmen. And I would like to hear from the panel the importance of referring to those of us who are descendants of slavery as freedmen, and why that is important. And I'd like to hear a little bit about United Sons, Daughters of Freedmen.
Okay, I'll start then. The concept came in 2020 when we started to realize that the term freedman was still a viable term, but that it wasn't being used anymore because the Daughters of the Confederacy, who scripted the Lost Cause teachings, removed the word freedman because this term was a recognition of our humanity. And they continued in the literature to call us Negroes, Blacks, coloreds, etc., the names that allude to our slavery condition. So we felt that resurrecting this term for today's day and time would be a little more beneficial legally than some of the other acronyms and names that we have out there. And we were inspired in a way by the Daughters of the Confederacy, not in a good way, but to counter their narrative. And this is what we've been doing with our organization, United Sons and Daughters of Freedmen. We are dedicated to ensuring that the broken promises of Reconstruction are fulfilled for today's American freedmen.
Okay, thank you so much for explaining that, because I think some people assume that reparations is based on race, and I continue to try to correct that when I hear it. It's important that it's based on lineage, you can't base it on race anyway, like that's not legal, and that would fail in the courts. So for people who are not aware of that, this is also why you'll hear people who are reparations activists explain that, like, even when you talk about reparations on the global level, legally, that would not hold up in the court in the United States. So thank you so much for diving into that. I want to get into this bill. So this is happening here in Massachusetts, where I am. It is an act establishing a Massachusetts Agency of Freedmen Affairs. This is Bill HD 3879. I want to hear a little bit about this. I see that the presenter for this is Brandy Fluker Reed. How were you able to get this far? I think this is the big question that a lot of people have, because we want to do more through the states, but how were you able to get them to even create the bill to establish an agency of Freedmen Affairs?
Well,
So
actually,
I can answer that. Oh, you can
okay,
go, Ali. I'm
go
sorry.
ahead. You want to do it?
This has been a long process. We started this back in 2023. We submitted an original proposal, and that bill was H93921. That bill has been in study since April of 2024. It didn't die. They put it in study. And the reason why they put it in study is Senator Miranda has a bill 1053. There's a race-based bill. And so the Judicial Committee suggested this year that we combine our efforts and we come up with one bill. And the team and I have worked vigilantly for the last few months, working with the opposition side, which would be Miranda's bill, which is 1053, to get the race language out of the bill. And we've had like several meetings with them, and those meetings were stalled on January 3rd, where they refused to remove African descent. We got them to remove African American. However, they wanted to put people of African descent. And so as the team is so expertly explained to them, that's still race-based, and it has nothing to do with the legacy of slavery in Massachusetts, especially because Massachusetts sanctioned slavery in 1641. But not only that, in the United States. And so when you have this African descent, it opens it up for everybody. So as a result of it, we just resubmitted our bill. The brothers worked very hard to get the language down pat and created a masterpiece for this year's submission. And so I myself went back to Brandy. We all talked, and she submitted the bill for both the Office of Freedmen Affairs, which we're still waiting for that language to be critiqued, but for one specific part. Everything else is fine except for one thing they want to go through House Counsel with. But as far as the commission, it's just the same bill as last year. It's just the brothers crafted a better, more perfect language masterpiece. And so I've had a relationship with her for the last couple of years.
This is why it's important to know who your local representatives are, guys. This is what,
It is.
Yeah, this is what I've been trying to tell people. Like, obviously, we don't have access to people. Most of us don't have access to people in Congress, and most of us don't have access to the president. But when it comes to some of these local representatives, I mean, there are town meetings, there are city meetings. I've gone to city council meetings before. I mean, these are things that you can attend. They're open to the public. So one of the things I do want to ask, and I'll pass it to you, Ali. In particular, I think a lot of people may not be aware that New England did have slavery. And I was kind of surprised that people didn't realize that. I think a lot of people think it was just the South. That's actually not true. Rhode Island was very heavily involved in the slave trade. And one of the products that they were involved with was rum. So a lot of people know Charleston, South Carolina, like they know the Carolinas and Georgia, but a lot of people don't realize that New England was also heavily involved in the slave trade. How would this bill work? Would this apply to people that were born in Massachusetts, or would it apply to all freedmen who are currently in Massachusetts? Like, how far back would this go?
That's a good question. The eligibility criteria is something that has to be worked out as well, right? We have some really good ideas on the eligibility criteria, but what I would like to see is for it to actually be inclusive of not only the people whose ancestry goes back to slavery, but also the people who may have come in later and had to experience the legacy of slavery in various forms that it came in, and still people of the American freedman class, not all Black people. And we're very, very particular and specific about that.
That's right. Because again, we moved around. I mean, we all have to remember the Great Migration. Like a lot of freedmen left the South and moved north. And then there's like this reversal going on where people are moving back south, but we moved around. I said the same thing about California. And that brings up another question, because I know this one is coming from people. we saw what happened in California. And at that point, Camilla has been on the show, and she was also on RBN as well, before they had the votes for the bill in the House. They already said that they had all these, politicians that agreed to sign on and said, yes, we support this. And it did sound very promising at the time. And then when it came time to bring the reparations bill in California to the floor for a vote, they decided not to do it. And I think people look at California as a model of, let's not try to do it that way again. Have you heard some of that type of pushback? And is there anything in place to try to prevent what happened in California to happen here in Massachusetts as well?
We haven't heard that kind of pushback because a lot of people are not really aware of what we're doing in Massachusetts. We try to stay under the radar because one of the problems that California experienced was, with their push being so public, they attracted a lot of negative attention from social media, particularly people on Twitter. Various groups on Twitter were involved in their process, particularly the public hearings and things, and it became a real crap show in a lot of ways. And so the work that we've been doing, we've been trying to stay under the radar. So we haven't been getting a lot of pushback from anybody because they don't really know what we're doing. We very intentional about that, not to keep people out of the process. The people in Massachusetts and the people in Boston, where we've been doing some work, they are very much aware of what we're doing. But outside of that, no. And everyone is very positive about, the outcome so far. So now we haven't been getting that kind of pushback about not doing it. But the thing is, we do have people who are concerned about language. So a lot of the reparationists are more mature in the sense of they understand nowadays with people like Marcel pushing. Marcel is another person a lot of people don't know that came through our camp. He's from out of our crew, right? And so he understands this very well, and he carries the message. He's been a real strong proponent of carrying the message and letting people know that this thing can't be race-based, right? And so that's our thing. It's like we're really strong about that. And California had to fight that kind of issue on certain levels. At the same time, you have a problem with the Democrats because the Democrats really don't want reparations to happen. They made that very clear the way they undermined their efforts at the last hour.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen that multiple times. Oh, I think Antonia's back. There we go. Let me add her back.
Yes, thank you.
There we go.
Thank you.
No, I've seen that happen very much so, and I think that Maura Healey, I have noticed something with her. Maura Healey's our governor. For those who are not aware, Maura Healey, for whatever reason, all of a sudden this year has been moving forward with a lot of initiatives. I believe it was either last year or the year before that. She did specify the need for there to be some type of, I don't know if she wants to call it wealth closure here in Boston, in Massachusetts in particular. She did acknowledge that. Do you know how she would feel about reparations? Has anybody spoken to her?
I have never spoken to Governor Healey directly. I do know that this initiative was started years ago on the state level. And then it was just revisited again, just like what brought the city of Boston. The city of Boston has its own task force. And as a matter of fact, I've been appointed to the task force due to the great work that we've done here in Boston on the ground. So I think that because the city has been pushing the initiative for reparations, it's only appropriate for the state to do so too. But most of the people that are in the state house, the politicians, whether it be on the Senate or the House side, are really pushing for reparations. And how we know this is the last year when we had the hearing for reparations, it was in the protected class status committee, and the Judiciary Committee was very open and very knowledgeable about American freedmen. And so we had several meetings with that committee as well too. And we spoke with Senator Eldridge, who is the chair of the Judiciary Committee. So people in Boston very much know the status of American freedmen, the ones who make the decisions. And to answer your question with regards to California, from my perspective, we started off with American freedmen. We've never wavered. We've never African American, Black, or people of color. We just don't use that verbiage. So we started off with American freedmen, and that's how we plan to end. And that's why I think we're getting the recognition with regards to the Office of Freedmen Affairs. Brother Ali can tell you we've done great research. We have in Boston a commission on African American studies that's overseen by the NAACP that's underutilized. And so we feel like those racial injustices that other people like Black immigrants are seeking justice for, they should take that to that particular commission. And so we're very specific on our lineage because they keep using the legacy of slavery or slave reparations. And when I'm out in public and I'm lobbying, I'm like, you can't use slave reparations and not pay homage and respect the original home party, which is our ancestors. And I make that perfectly clear. And because you're in Massachusetts as well, too, we have a high number of Black immigrants or people who consider themselves to be Black. And for some reason, without having that specific language spoken in the public, everybody thinks it's all Black Lives Matter situation and they're entitled to reparations. And so the brothers and myself, we're very firm, and I have a co-founder too, Jonathan Bryan, here in Boston, very firm on educating people on our we don't say lineage, I say heritage, on our heritage, because people to be politically correct have not done that. And so that's one of our biggest challenges. But never spoke to Governor Healy directly. I work directly with the mayor. I work in the State House. I have several contacts there, and also the Judiciary Committee, the actual chair we've had meetings with. So we've been really working hard, and we solidified a lot of work. We've done a lot of workshops. We've done a lot of PowerPoint presentations to educate the politicians on what we really stand for. So I don't know. I do know this. I'm going to say this. Last year, when we were expecting to have the H3921 voted on, we were told that it kept getting pushed off and pushed off and pushed off. And they said they were working on the parentage bill. And so I'm going to be perfectly honest with you. I was disappointed with that. And the parentage bill was to solidify taking fathers off the birth certificate and naming them other birth parent. And that was something that was really important to Governor Healy, and also a lot of the LGBT community that sat on the state legislators, whatever. And I just felt like you could have done both at the same time. So that was really disheartening to me as a constituent. But that was a primary bill at the witching hour last year. And we, instead of letting the bill die, because they could have, they just pushed it over. And then we were signaled to come up with one bill. And that's how we got into this relationship with the other people in which we've been sitting down with.
Right. And this is what oftentimes has happened. We've seen this happen in Congress as well. Like they will promote other issues and push bills or legislations that, like there's the HR 40 in Congress that's been there forever. They'll just push that to the side because it's not as important to them, but we can see them urgently pass bills for other groups. So this is something that I have been telling people about. Also, for those who are not aware as well, Massachusetts has one of the highest wealth inequalities in the United States. There was that study done by Dr. Darity, which hit the Boston Globe a couple years ago, and people were so shocked by this, except for I think us. But a lot of people were so shocked to find out that the average white family in Boston has over a net worth of over $250,000, and the average Black family had like $8, right? So when we talk about reparations, it's important that you, the audience, you understand that it's a debt that's owed. When you hear somebody refer to that as a handout, reparations is not a handout. There was a promise that was made by General Sherman for 40 acres and a mule. Apparently they started to do that at some point, and then that was taken away. And so that has not been paid. So you're talking about descendants of slavery in this country that worked and were not paid. We're talking about unpaid labor. We're not just talking about that, though. We're talking about the redlining. We're talking about Jim Crow laws, all of these things that stopped us from generating some type of generational wealth in this country, which I think is incredibly important. And then there's also this bill as well. I want to go ahead and bring this one up, Bill HD. 3865, an act to cure us of the liabilities that ultimately restricted equity. I want to hear a little bit about this one.
All right, I'll start with this one real briefly. This was originally the H3921 bill. and my team and I, particularly Brother Ali, we got together and we edited out a lot of what we would call the language that would trigger strict scrutiny. We removed certain words like race or racial right outside of I believe that's the Racial Equity Commission that's mentioned in the bill. We removed anything that the other side, meaning Edward Bloom and his American Alliance for Equal Rights and other like groups, like the group that's suing the city of Evanston, Illinois, which has halted their reparations program. And ultimately, the courts are going to come back and rule that this is a form of discrimination because it is based on race. And so, what we did was we took the information that we have been studying for the past 4 to 5 years and we crafted it in the language of this bill. And we removed any vestiges of race. One of the things that the courts have said just as recently as June of 2023 in the Students for Fair Admissions versus Harvard case, e.g., the affirmative action case, was that the government can plainly remedy a race based harm that it has caused so long as it advances a colorblind constitution. And this means that any legislation or any programs that come out of any legislation must be narrowly tailored so that it can have a form of discrimination, if you will, but that's not based on race. And when you have, as you mentioned, Bostonians, Freedmen in Boston worth only $8, um, yeah, this is part of what government, along with private citizens, did. So that's the gist of that bill. If Anthony and Ali want to add a little bit more to that.
I would just say this: when you read that bill, because the truth is there are two competing bills at this point. So you have the bill that we are showing, or that you just showed on the screen, that we crafted, and then there's another group that crafted a race-based bill. I believe that it was put in the chat by one of the members of the consortium that was involved with creating the bill. We were represented in that consortium as well, trying to get to a place where we can come to a consensus on presenting one bill. Like Sister Antonia said earlier, that didn't work out because the people who were members of that consortium, which included the NAACP, I think the Urban League, certain groups from out of Boston, the Boston area, or the Massachusetts, the state, and even ADOS was a part of that consortium. They came 95% of the way towards where we were. We were able to convince them in a lot of it, but they didn't want to remove the last pieces of the race language in it. So it kind of like, we went our separate ways, right? And so we have our bill, they have their bill. Theirs is based on race. If you read it, you'll see a lot of race language in it, as opposed to ours, which is specifically based on the class of people that come up from slavery in the United States. So we're very, very particular about that. We made that clear to everybody as we were meeting, as Sister Antonia was meeting with them. She was really speaking for us, and we were sending messages like, listen, this is not going to work, and we're not going to be a part of anything that we can see that down the line is going to be a problem. So it's not really necessarily a thing of creating a race-based commission, because they have two for us, for Black people in the state of Massachusetts already. They have the Commission on the Status of African Americans, and then they have a Commission on the Status of Black Men and Boys. So those two things are race-based. They have a Latino and Latina commission. They have one for Asian Americans. So they have these race-based commissions. The problem that we're having with creating these commissions is once it comes down to meting out remedy for the target group, that's when people like Edward Bloom are going to step in, because he's already made it very clear that anything that's going to be based on race, he's coming after that. And so that's our thing. We're thinking down the line. People are thinking like in the moment, let's get the commission established and then we'll worry about this later. It's like, yeah, but the foundation of it is the legislation that creates the commission. You're going to have to work from there. So we're like, build the foundation the right way. Do it the right way from the foundation. Then as you moving forward, everything else is going to be on a strong, firm foundation. That's not what happened with the other bills. So we have ours and they have theirs.
That's a very good point. I was just going to say, that's a very good point that you mentioned there, Ali, to do it right the first time around.
Mm-hmm.
Go
Yeah.
ahead.
So I just like to add that there were literally 7 different entities that came together for this consortium. We had Narcan and Cobra. We had ADOS Foundation, representative from that ADOS Foundation. We also had the NAACP. We had the Urban League. We had Encuentro Diaspora. We had Embrace Boston. So this is historical in the sense of we had a roundtable of all the grassroots and organizations that had a vested interest in reparations. And in the end, when I went back to the team and I said, listen, they want to put African descent in it, and we agreed not to. When we sent the email, or Brother Ali sent the email asking, either we take it out or just take out American Freedmen, period, and then take United Sons and Daughters off this bill as being a contributor. So to our surprise, and this is just how do you say it, how when people don't get their way and they don't want to see what we're talking about and they don't want to listen and they want to do things their way, they end up putting freedmen, freed women, and their descendants in the bill. And so to me, if you're not going to agree to what we're talking about and you want to keep it race-based, why do you have African American, why do you have African descent and freed women, men and women, and their descendants? That's just too many titles for us. And so from my perspective, the legislators who make the decisions are like, listen, you all figure out who you are. And
don't forget with special consideration.
Yeah, with special consideration for African American. So I don't know. I mean, you're from Boston. These people are not. That's not their job to figure out who we are. It's not their job to label us. And so when you have a bill that has 4 different identities in it, it's kind of productive.
Right.
It should be one status for people. And if we're talking about slave reparations, why do you have to put African descent? Because to be perfectly honest with you, we in America, we're a mixed bag. We're not just African descent. So some people don't want to be called African descent or African American or whatever. So we're talking about the legacy of slavery and the badges and incidents that created the stain of slavery for a certain class of people that have this status. And so we have a right to honor our ancestors and what was been done to us and not be able to include other people. And I just thought it was disingenuous to add freed men, freed women, and their descendants with African descent and African American. That's just a hodgepodge. And it's very confusing to these white politicians.
Right.
How are they supposed to determine who we are? And they're looking at us like we're crazy. They're like, okay, you black people can't figure out who you are. And so that turns them off. And so I was really disappointed in that sense. And like Ali said, after 4 meetings, we were there. I mean, when they said American freedmen / people of African descent, I'm like, well, is African descent defining the American freedmen people? Or is this another group of people, and who are they? And I never got that answer. So why is it that when we have to do legislation, we always have to include somebody else? Why can't it just be straightforward for what's been done to us? And I'm going to be perfectly honest with you. You would think that, white supremacists or white people are holding us back. It's not. It's our own people. Our people have this Pan-African ideology, and it's not the old school Pan-African ideology. It's more of a new way Pan-African ideology, and they feel like they're forcing their ideology on us. And not everybody's Pan-African. Not everybody wants to repatriate, and not everybody wants to be in the motherland. Not everybody wants to acknowledge or run around, speaking about their African heritage. We're talking about what happened to us here. It's 400 plus years of harms,
Right.
of history here in America. We have the right not to relate to Africa. But the people who are holding us back, like in California, those were Pan-Africans that didn't submit the bill. They're the ones that were jumping up and down, laughing and making fun of the fact that they held the bills. It had nothing to do with anything else other than the Pan-African people who want to control the narrative, controlling us as American freedmen. And it's about money. It's about money. It's not like the old I'm black and I'm proud era, liberation, people getting out, fighting for their rights, whatever. This is about money. This is about 501(c)(3)s getting money, getting bags, and it's really sick that we've been sold out you know what I'm saying, for our heritage by our own people who are American freedmen most of the time. Some of them aren't, but they just can't get that ideology out of their head. And it has nothing to do with our ancestors and what's been done to us. They don't even want to talk about the history sometimes. They're like, oh, that happened. We want reparations for slavery, but we don't care about the history. We want to get reparations for right now. We're starving. And it's sad.
Right. That's a really good point. And I've heard that from a lot of people. I heard that from Marcel. I heard it from, there was a gentleman who was a part of the reparations task force in New York that came onto the show. Same situation. I've heard this from different reparations activists, and it's a big problem. I was talking about this the other night about one of the issues that happened with the feminist movement, that Gloria Steinem wave of feminism. One of the issues was that she was able to basically make the case that white women were also marginalized. So then the next thing you know, white women are added to affirmative action, and we know what happens when other groups are added. Like, we get pushed to the bottom. So I think it's important to acknowledge that. I guess the final question that I have for all of you is, what are the next steps now that you have these bills?
Well, we're going to launch a call to action soon. And for the state of Massachusetts, especially, we're waiting for the language of the other bill for the Freedmen Affairs Agency to generate on the state's website before we make that call, so we can, pretty much package both bills together. I mean, we've been instrumental behind the scenes, even in places like California. We've worked with groups there. We've worked with groups in Texas, in New York. We've worked with people all over the country. So our work does not stop. Right now, we want to introduce legislation on the federal level to reestablish the Freedmen's Bureau as a Freedmen Affairs Agency, or an Office of American Freedmen Affairs. And we're going to keep educating, because that's part of what we've done. Sister Antonia has had us in some rooms with some very, very important people in the state of Massachusetts and Connecticut, senators, state senators, etc. And I want to just make one closing statement, real brief, because I see people in the chat speaking about lineage. My last name is Way. My father's and his mother's last name is Wallace, and my mother's last name is Way. Their ancestors' last name is Watkins and Glenn, right? So these are our lineages in the United States of America. We stay away from using the terminology lineage or lineage based, because when you look at it in a legal context, it also ties into race. And this was something that we have shown. So what we're saying is that reparations will be based upon our status. And if you go back and you look at the oral arguments in that affirmative action case, Brett Kavanaugh was having a back and forth with Cameron Norris, one of the lawyers for the Students for Fair Admissions, who admitted that the benefits that descendants of slaves received was not based on their skin color, and that it was not based on their race, but that it was based on their status. And we've since shown a plethora of information that solidifies those facts. So I just wanted to add that for those that do not know, because you may have not listened to Be the Power, and those of us at United Sons and Daughters of Freedmen, because of your own ideological allegiance, organizational allegiance, et cetera, look it up yourself. Look up the cases that have linked race and lineage together. And we feel that the language has to be airtight in order for us to survive a strict scrutiny challenge. Thank you for having us. I am so appreciative.
Thank you. Thank you all so much for coming on. Keep me posted. Let me know how it goes. In the meantime, I am going to try to see if I can. It'll be tough, but I am going to try to see if I can get Governor Healy on the show, because I have some questions for her. Yes. Not just about reparations, but some other ones. So I'll try to work on that. But thank you all so much for coming on, and keep me posted.
No doubt. Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much for having us. Have a wonderful evening. Bye-bye now.
Hey guys, this was a Sabby clip. If you like what you saw, hit that like button and subscribe.